The twins were blue when she found them, not the blue of a winter sky, not the blue of a cold creek at dusk, but the particular, terrible blue of living things that have given almost everything they have left to give. Two small boys, no older than 4, pressed together like a single breathing creature inside a snow-hollowed log at the edge of her property line. Their coats were a man's coat, cut in half and wrapped separate. Their boots were rags. One of them was still clutching a carved wooden horse with no head, the neck snapped clean at some earlier violence, and his fist was locked so tight around it that Nora could not pry it loose even after she gathered him up in both arms and ran. She did not walk. She ran. Nora Voss had lived 31 years on the high plains of Montana Territory, and she had never once run from anything, not from the drought of 79 that killed her father's cattle and his spirit in the same season, not from the Thornfield men who rode through 3 years after her husband Calvin died and told her a woman alone had no legal claim to land her name wasn't on. Not from any of it. She had stood still and faced everything that came. But those boys, those 2 terrible, silent, half-dead little boys, made her run like the earth was crumbling behind her. She got them inside, got the fire up past the smoke-back point, stripped the rags from their feet and pressed their soles between her palms until she felt, with something close to religious gratitude, the slow return of sensation. One boy whimpering, the other still silent. She spooned elk broth from the pot she kept perpetually warming on the back of the stove because the winters here did not negotiate. She got them both upright, got colour back into their cheeks by degrees. It was only then, when the immediate catastrophe had narrowed itself to something manageable, that she noticed the man. He was slumped against the outside of her front door. She had not seen him when she came in because she'd come in through the side entrance from the barn, the way she always did in winter, shaking snow off her coat onto the porch boards. But when she opened the front door to haul in more split wood, he was there, seated against the doorframe like a man who'd decided to rest for just a moment and then forgot to stop. Tall, even sitting, dark coat, dark hair matted with ice, a rifle across his knees that he no longer had the strength to lift. He was not dead. She established that first, pressing 2 fingers to his neck the way her mother had taught her when she was 8 years old, and they found a cattle hand frozen in the field after a norther. His pulse was there, faint and irregular, like a candle flame under a door gap, but there. She dragged him in. It took everything she had. The man was broad-shouldered and solid, the way working men are solid, not built for show, but built for endurance, every inch of him dense with the kind of muscle that comes from years of labor that doesn't pause for weather. She got him to the floor near the fire, loosened his collar, and pulled the ice-crusted boots from his feet. His hands were the worst. She'd seen frostbite before, and she recognized its particular cruelty, the hardness, the waxen color, the way the skin didn't give. She worked on him for 2 hours while the twins slept in her bed, pressed together the way they'd been in that log, curled into the one warmth shape that had kept them alive. He came to sometime past midnight. His eyes opened, grey, she noticed, an unusual flat grey like river ice just before it breaks, and he looked at her without confusion or panic, which struck her as strange. Most men who woke in strange circumstances came up swinging or shouting. He simply looked at her, took in the room in one slow sweep, and then looked at the closed bedroom door. "The boys," he said. His voice was cracked at the edges from cold. "Sleeping," she said. He closed his eyes. Something in his face released that she hadn't realized was held. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet," she told him, because the truth was she did not know what she'd invited into her house. She didn't know this man. She didn't know those children. She didn't know what they were running from or who might be running after them, and on the high Montana plain, in the dead of a winter that had already killed 3 men in the valley that she knew of, not knowing those things was not a small problem. "What's your name?" she asked. He was quiet long enough that she thought he'd passed out again. "Elias," he finally said. "Elias Kane." She'd heard that name before. She was almost certain of it. She sat back on her heels, firelight catching the side of her face, and tried to place it. The way you try to place a song you haven't heard in years. It was there, somewhere, in something someone had said, something she'd read, or half-read, or overheard, at the Hardwick trading post the last time she'd made the 12-mile ride for salt and lamp oil. She couldn't catch it. Not yet. But the name sat in the room with them like a third presence. Something unfinished, something with weight. Outside, the wind pushed hard against the cabin walls, and the snow came down in the kind of silence that is not peaceful, but is instead the silence of the world being buried. And Nora Voss looked at this man on her floor and the 2 sleeping boys in her bed, and felt, with the particular clarity that only true isolation can produce, that her life had just changed in a way she did not yet have language for. She put another log on the fire. She did not sleep. By morning the storm had sealed every direction. Nora stood at the window and looked out at a world reduced to white and grey, and the howling space between them. The trail to Hardwick was gone. The trail to the Lundgren homestead 3 miles east was gone. The sky and the ground had become one continuous thing, and her cabin, 12 feet by 20, with the attached lean-to she'd built for the horses, was the only fixed point in it. She fed the twins first. The one who'd been clutching the wooden horse, she'd learn later his name was Samuel, ate without speaking, but ate everything she put in front of him. His brother, Daniel, watched her with the focused, measuring attention of a child who has learned that the world requires watching. They were identical in face, but not in temperament, which she noted in the way she noted everything about situations she didn't fully understand. Carefully, without showing that she was doing it. When she brought a plate to Elias, he was already trying to sit up. "Don't," she said. "I've been down long enough." "You've been down 8 hours. That's not long enough by half." He looked at her, looked at the plate, sat up anyway, because he was the kind of man who would, and she could see that about him already. She didn't take the plate away. She set it in his lap and pulled the chair from the table and sat across from him, and they regarded each other in the grey winter light, while the twins murmured quietly to each other in the bedroom. "You're going to want to know," he said. "I already know some of it," she said. "Your hands are lawyer smooth except the gun calluses. You cut your own hair. The boys' coats were made from yours, which means you were warmer before they were cold. You're not their father by blood. They're fair and you're dark. But you'd die for them, which means they're yours by something that counts more. She paused. And I know your name. Something shifted in his expression. What do you know about my name? Not enough. Yet. He ate in silence for a moment. Outside, the storm threw itself against the north wall of the cabin, as if it had a grievance. The fire popped and settled. Their father was my partner, Elias said finally. Tom Aldrich. We ran cattle together up in the Judith Basin for 6 years. Good land, good operation. He stopped. He died in October. Fever that came on fast and took him in 4 days. His wife went 2 years before him. The boys have no one else. So you took them. Tom asked me to, before he went. And now someone's looking for them. Elias looked at her directly. What makes you say that? Because men who are running from nothing don't dress their children in half a coat and walk into a blizzard, she said. And because you came to my door instead of the road, which means you were moving through country on purpose, avoiding something. He set the plate down. A long, loaded silence stretched between them. The Aldrich name carries land, he said. Tom owned 3,000 acres clear-deeded, no mortgage, no lien. His boys are the heirs. There are men in Billings who would prefer that inheritance end up in different hands. A lawyer named Hargrove and 2 brothers named Cutter, who've been following us since the Yellowstone crossing. Nora was quiet. She looked at the bedroom door. She thought about Calvin's grave at the edge of the north pasture, half visible now under its white shroud. She thought about the year the Thornfield men came, and how she'd stood in this same doorway with a shotgun, and a deed she'd had refiled in her own name at a cost of everything she'd had saved. She understood, bone deep, what it meant when men with legal cover came for land. How far behind you are the Cutter brothers? She asked. Storm might have slowed them, might not. They know this country better than I do. He looked down at his hands, the swollen, damaged hands that had carried children through a blizzard. I have no right to ask you anything, he said. You already saved our lives. I can take the boys and go as soon as it breaks. And there it was, the decision. Not announced as won, not presented with ceremony. Just sitting there in the morning grey light of her cabin, quiet and enormous, the way real decisions always are. She could say yes, let them go. Watch them walk back into the white and whatever came after it, and return to her solitude and her safety and the careful, defended life she'd built since Calvin died. No one could blame her. No one even needed to know they'd been here. Or she could say no. She stood up, took his empty plate, went to the stove and refilled it without asking. You're not going anywhere, she said, until those hands work right and those boys have had 3 hot meals. After that, we'll have a conversation about what comes next. She heard, rather than saw, the thing that moved through him at that. They'll come here, he said. If they're tracking us, they'll follow the trail to your door. Then they'll come here, she said, simply. She sat back down and poured coffee into 2 tin cups and slid one across the table. And outside, the storm howled with what sounded almost like a human voice, and somewhere in the distance, or maybe it was just the wind, maybe it was just her own tightened nerves, she thought she heard the sound of horses. It was not yet the Cutter brothers. But it would be. The storm broke on the second morning, the way Montana storms sometimes do. Not gradually, not apologetically, but all at once, as if a door had been thrown open in the sky and the light came through hard and indifferent and blinding off the new snow. Nora was outside splitting wood when she saw the riders, 3 of them still distant, moving along the ridge line above the south pasture where the land lifted before it fell again toward the creek. They were moving slowly, which was worse than fast. Fast meant passing through. Slow meant reading sign. She went inside without hurrying, because hurrying would be visible from the ridge. "Riders," she said. 3, South Ridge. Elias was on his feet before she finished the sentence. On his rifle, with the careful attention of a man inventorying his assets. Now he moved to the window, keeping to one side of the frame. "Cutter Brothers use 3 men," he said. "Hargroves hired a tracker, man named Pell, who rode for the army before he found more profitable work." "Which one is the dangerous one?" "All 3, he said, in different ways. Marcus Cutter is fast and doesn't think. Jeb Cutter is slow and thinks too much. Pell just finds things that don't want to be found." Nora looked at the twins. Samuel had gone still in that particular way children go still, when they sense adult fear, absorbing it, storing it, becoming very quiet. Daniel had picked up the headless wooden horse from the table where it had been sitting and was holding it in his lap with both hands. "Bedroom," she said to the boys. "Close the door. Don't open it unless I come for you myself." Samuel moved immediately. Daniel looked at Elias. Elias nodded once. Daniel went. "There's a root cellar," Nora said. "Trap door under the east rug. If it comes to it, you can get them down there and out through the drainage tunnel. It lets out in the creek bed 50 yards east. From there, the tree line is another 30. "I'm not leaving you with—" "I'm not asking you to make a decision right now," she said. "I'm telling you the geography. Decide when you need to decide." She looked at him steadily. "And if they're tracking you legal, under some writ from Billings, then I'm the one they'll have to deal with first. This is my land. They cannot come onto it without cause. Hargrove will have manufactured cause. Manufactured cause still needs to be presented at my door. And while it's being presented, people can be moving." She pulled her coat from the peg. "Let me talk to them." Nora, it was the first time he'd used her name. She noticed it. She pulled on the coat and took the shotgun from above the door and stepped outside. The 3 riders had come down off the ridge and were moving across the flat toward the cabin at the same unhurried pace. Up close they resolved into what she'd expected. 2 men with the broad, weathered faces of brothers who've spent their whole lives in the same wind, and 1 smaller man behind them who sat his horse with the loose, watchful ease of a predator that doesn't have to announce itself. She stood on the porch with the shotgun rested in the crook of her arm, barrel down, not raised, not lowered, a question. The lead rider, Marcus Cutter, she assumed the faster one, pulled up about 30 feet out. He had a lawman's badge pinned to his coat. It caught the winter sun. "Morning, ma'am," he said, not warmly. "Morning," she said. "We're looking for a man named Elias Kane, traveling with 2 young boys. You seen anyone come through this way in the last few days?" "I've seen the inside of my cabin," she said. "Storm kept me there." Marcus Cutter's eyes moved across the front of the cabin, across the single set of footprints in the new snow from her own trip to the woodpile, reading, measuring. "You live out here alone," the second one said, Jeb, slower, thoughtful, already calculating. "Since my husband passed. Hard life for a woman alone. I manage." The small man, Pell, had not spoken. He was looking at the snow around the side of the cabin. He had the eyes of a man who reads, ground the way others read print, fluent and fast. And she watched him the way you watch a snake that hasn't decided yet. "Mind if we water our horses at your trough?" Marcus asked. "Trough's frozen." "Mind if we look around a bit?" "I do mind," she said. The barrel of the shotgun moved perhaps 2 inches, not raised, just re-angled, just enough that the geometry of the conversation changed. "You've got a badge, mister?" "Cutter, deputy out of Billings." "Deputy Cutter, a deputy needs a writ to search private property. You have one?" A pause. Jeb and Marcus exchanged the kind of look that brothers exchange when the thing they thought would be easy isn't. "We can get one," Jeb said, "and come back when you have it," she said. "I'll put coffee on." Another silence. Pell's eyes finally moved from the snow to her face, and she held them, and the moment stretched out long and taut as wire before a fence breaks. "We'll be back," Marcus said. He pulled his horse around. They rode. She watched them go all the way back to the ridge before she moved, and when she turned to go back inside, Elias was standing in the doorway. "You bought us a day," he said. "Maybe less." "I know," she said. Pell saw something. "I know that too." She walked past him into the warmth and stood at the stove and held both palms out over the heat, not because she was cold, but because she needed to feel something solid, something reliable, while the rest of the world outside her walls gathered itself for what was coming. "Then we'd better use the day well," she said. That afternoon had a quality she would return to for years, the particular fragile luminosity of a day that exists inside a crisis, insulated from the before and the after, lit from within by the fact of its own brevity. She taught Samuel to make biscuits. It had not been planned. She'd been at the work table measuring out flour, and he'd appeared at her elbow with the quiet materialization of young children and small animals watching her hands. She'd handed him the wooden spoon without comment, and he'd taken it with a solemnity that nearly broke her, and they'd worked side by side for an hour while Daniel slept on the braided rug, with Nora's old cattle dog Ajax, one small arm thrown over the animal's neck. Elias sat at the table and cleaned both rifles and said almost nothing, but he watched the boys the way a man watches things he cannot believe he's been trusted with. "He used to do this," Elias said after a while, quiet. "Not to anyone in particular. Tom. He'd get nervous about something and he'd find a task with his hands. Couldn't think and be still at the same time." "Some people are like that," Nora said. "I used to make fun of him for it." A pause. "I'd give a great deal to make fun of him for it one more time." Samuel was patting dough with focused intensity. He looked up at Elias and said, without preamble, "Uncle Eli says Papa's watching from a cloud." Elias looked at the boy. "That's right. Can he see the snow?" "I expect he can see all of it." Samuel seemed satisfied with this. He went back to the dough. Nora let the silence settle before she spoke. "How long did you know him, Tom?" 12 years. Rode together up from Texas when we were both young and foolish enough to think Montana was going to be easier than it looked on a map. Something almost like humor crossed his face. It wasn't. Nothing up here is. No. He set down the cleaning cloth. He was the better man, I want you to know that. Between the two of us, he was the one who deserved what he built. He was patient with things I couldn't be patient with. People. Situations. He glanced at the boys. Children. I didn't know what to do with them at first, after he died. You figured it out, she said. I cut my coat in half in a blizzard, he said. That's not figuring it out. That's just refusing to fail at the last possible thing. She turned from the stove and looked at him properly. That's exactly what figuring it out is, she said. He met her eyes, held them. Something passed between them that neither of them named because naming it would have made it too large for the room they were in. She went back to the biscuits. Later, when the boys were settled, she found herself sitting across from him again at the table, the fire banked low, 2 cups of coffee between them going slowly cold. She'd taken Calvin's old Bible from the shelf, not for any particular purpose, just to have something to hold, and she turned it in her hands while she spoke. My husband left me this land clear, she said. Not because he was a generous man, he wasn't, or not in the easy ways, but he believed in what he'd built, and he believed I could hold it, and that turned out to be the most love he had to give. She paused. After he died, men came, men with papers, men who wanted what wasn't theirs, and I stood them off because what they were doing to me wasn't different in kind from what Hargrove is doing to those boys. The land, Elias said. The land, she confirmed. And the idea that the law can be worn like a coat by people who own the tailor. She set the Bible down. I won that fight. Understand that I'm not helping you understand. That I'm not helping you because I'm reckless, she said. I'm helping you because I know what this is, and I know what it costs when good people don't help. Elias reached into his coat, slowly, carefully, a gesture clearly telegraphed, and drew out a folded paper. He set it on the table between them. She looked at it without touching it. Tom's will, he said, witnessed legal, notarized in Lewistown, names the boys as sole heirs and names me guardian until they come of age. Hargrove's been claiming it's a forgery. Is there a judge who'll stand up to Hargrove? There's a federal circuit judge out of Helena named Aldridge, he said. Old. Incorruptible. Tom knew him years ago. He paused. If I can get the boys to Helena, to Aldridge, the will stands.